So now I want to ask you, after hearing that, is there a place for tradition and reflection in your practice? If so, where? Also, how do you showcase and pay homage to the creatives before you that paved the way? This could be your ancestors, your mentors, your peers, or other inspirational persons in your life.
I always try to start with giving credit, always, whether it's always recognizing the names. Because there's three people that are my mentors, for example, that I always give credit to. It's Chris Lavelle, who helped me with videography. There's Bernard Jackson, who helped me with photography. And then there's also Orlando Rivera Jr., who helped me with graphics. So just even understanding where those knowledges came from, the history that they have, just even studying different videographers outside of the city, whether it's the hip hop, it was not Benny, yeah, it was Benny Boom, he was a videographer. Hype Williams, who's another music videographer. So, but that's just in the music aspect, but there's like Steven Spielberg, who's more into the film aspect. And all of those people have inspiration just from watching what their vision was and what their mind was able to create, and having that visual be able to inspire what I have. But going down to the traditions, I feel like what I do, because it's multimedia production, I'm allowed to tap into different traditions and even also understand what those traditions are. Whether it's Oriental, whether it's Asian, whether it's a Russian culture, whether it's Jewish, I'm allowed to be able to tap into those rooms and just understand what the atmosphere is. So I think that's where tradition is allowed in what I do, and I think it's like a full circle of knowledge and creativity on both sides.
I love that.
For me, it's definitely a part of pulling in ancestry, and part of respecting it is academics for me. I got a degree in blackness from Howard University. One of my degrees is African American Studies. Yeah, the real HU. And I'm constantly buying books, I'm constantly researching. I truly do believe there's nothing new in the sun, under the sun. And I also believe that everything we need to know is in a book somewhere. We just haven't read it yet, or written it, either way. That being said, definitely learning about our culture. Like, one of the things that inspires me so much about Springfield is our history, right? So quickly going back to 2020, when I did that mural on Court Square, everyone was in a whole like tizzy or whatever. But the reason why we chose to do that protest mural in that location specifically is because that first church is so historic. And one of the dopest things about Springfield is we got rid of slavery way before the rest of the country did.
Absolutely.
And so when the Slave Refugee Act was in place, and there are slave catchers that can go into different jurisdictions and steal freed men, or they weren't considered freed men because they were runaway, but take slaves back. We, Springfieldians, had gangs, groups of people of black and white and Native American who would meet right there at that first church in that same very location. And they would plan it out and go and rush that slave catcher out of town. Like, our history is insane. Same thing, I've heard stories about not only Harriet Tubman, but people like Martin Luther King going to Springfield College. Like, this is a black hub where blackness has allowed to be free for a very long time. And so knowing our history is something that can always, always, always bring honor to it. Besides that, I like to, again, pay homage to the people that directly in my life. So Shalon Brown is my social justice mama. Ooh. I wouldn't be here, this city wouldn't be here without her. And there's so many people that I can list that's a part of it. And then I will say the last part would be pulling the next generation up. I think that's so important. I want it to be easier for the next generation to create change and to sustain systemic change than it was for us, right? So I think a big part of honoring our ancestors and what they did for us is making sure we're doing our part in doing what we need to do for the next generation.
I love that. And Ari, I just want to switch up the question for you. So I know you're in the business of people. You know, humans are your first resource. And so I want to ask, what does accessible space look like within the areas of your creative career? And how do you make space for yourself and others?
You said, how does accessible space, what does that look like?
Like within your cultural identity or yourself as a woman, like what does accessible space look like in your creative career? And how do you make that? I'm putting you on the spot here, so.
No, that's a good question. I mean, for me right now, I'll be honest, my experience from like really coming into Springfield has always been about accessible space. Like Tiffany was one of the first people that I really met in this city, and the different platforms to be able to talk about what you do, building a network to what you would like to do moving forward. It's always kind of been accessible, I think, in this space. Right now, I know like for our event, New Year Better Us, that we have coming up, it's an opportunity for people to like share what they've been doing throughout the year, and network with people maybe they would have otherwise not been in the same room as. Yep. So, Mike, for instance, he'll be there, and he'll be, he'll be accessible to everyone who's there in that moment, right? Because he's at the event. You can ask him questions, be like, okay, what are some next steps I should be taking? What are some things I should be tapping into if I want to build on my marketing, right? Yeah. So I think so for me, again, I think accessible space for like building my network, my mental health, all of that has been available to me really since I've gotten here. But I also think it's becoming more, it used to be more about who you know, yeah. I think. If you didn't know the right people, you were never going to be in those rooms. You're going to see it on Facebook later and be like, damn, I wish I was there. But I think that through things like the SCCC, now we have websites, platforms that go surpass your actual network of friends, so that you can actually reach these accessible spaces.
And so I'll jump in. I love that answer. Not only is that talking about accessibility, it's talking about you as an individual and the things that you do, helping people to glue each other together so they can realize that the 6 degrees of separation and the things that they want to do is only as far as they can reach. And so if you can reach out and you can get something within Springfield, you should be doing that, or you should know somebody who knows somebody. Yeah. And we're putting that together now through the SCCC and all the events that we're doing and people that we know. So it's great to have New Year Better Us coming up. Can you tell me about that date?
Yes, January 14th.
Okay. And where do we find any information on that? Like, where are the tickets?
We can.
You can go ahead and purchase your tickets for sponsorship, the general admission. We just sold out of vendors, so unfortunately we won't be able to have those. But if you go to bit.ly/NYBU 2023. bit.ly/NYBU 2023.
Nice.
The question you just asked is so important, and I think everyone in this room has done a lot to create more accessible spaces, whether it's Art Meets, whether it's Lux, whether it's Black and Brown Wall Street Mall pop-ups, you know what I mean? We've done a lot. For me, though, I have not reached a point where I can say Springfield has reached its accessibility goals. There are so many resources, funding opportunities, just initiatives in general that the average Black and brown person does not know about, does not have access to. And then on the flip side of that as well, where I want to see accessibility the most is when the larger corporations, the larger organizations are doing things that were not an afterthought. So they don't make their whole strategic plan and then be like, oh, what about the Black and brown people? How do they fit in here? Oh, do we have enough DEI stuff in here?
Or can we throw some do-rags?
Can we throw some do-rags in there? You know what I mean? So once the mainstream culture economy that is well-funded is consistently thinking about the people in the community it serves, because they get these monies based off all our demographics, then I'll feel like this is a much more accessible place.
So that leads right into the next question. Do you, in your line of work or the things that you're planning in this next year, have projects or areas of focus centered around roots and the connections to one history? So how are you pushing that forward?
I think my aspect would be more towards the visual aspect and history of what Springfield is. So just going back to the documentation of what I created, what I've documented in the time that I was here, but then also be able to reach back to other videographers and photographers who've documented before us, like Ed Cohen, who just recently did did an exposition. He did a book and did an exposition for, I forget the brother's name.
It's okay.
But he did an exposition about him, but he was a well-known black man back in the day, and he just did his presentation, but that's history that was documented in the city of Springfield by a Springfield photographer, and there's stories in those images that I'm pretty sure he has that we don't know of. So as long as we're able to tap into that history, which is my goal, just be able to collect as much as we can because there's so much untold history that the world doesn't know.
And that visual storytelling is very, very important, because not everybody can listen to things that we're saying now, but if they can see that picture, they can see that march, they can see those slaves being sequestered and everybody around.
James Baldwin.
James Baldwin, perfect.
Appreciate you.
It's just really important for us to have not only visual cues, but then also being able to hear those stories. And so that history of people coming back and then sharing that, like word of mouth about what was happening then, and then having the visual evidence of it, that's power of people.
I'll talk to the SCCC initiatives directly. So a part of what Darius alluded to was the Springfield Identity Development Initiative, where we're really focused on building a positive visual representation. It's not creating something out of nothing, because we already are positive, growing, healing, developing. We're just focused on capturing that in a way that it can be accessed to all. So that's one way that we're creating history and reaching back into history. Another part I would say is the opportunity through our grant that's coming up. So for the Love of Springfield grant, we are going to be creating an opportunity for 2 $5,000 grant awards and $21,000 grant awards.
Wait, how many?
20, yeah. So 21,000 and 5,000. Yeah, we redistributed this
There's money.
Everybody gonna eat. But the idea is you can gain access to those funds in 2 ways. One, creating some type of visual experience, some type of content-based experience that describes or defines your love of Springfield. And that could mean a variety of things. It's up to your creativity, but we want to get to know what Springfield means to you. The second way is to strategically plan an initiative that strengthens the identity of Springfield. So as we're creating history, we want to make sure that people have the funding for it, and then that we're historically memorializing it. I will also say in our year 2, we're going to be doing something called Color Me Conscious, which is initiatives focused on building certain elements. So as Ari alluded to, we did a pink party a couple years ago. We're bringing that back. That's on women's empowerment, healing, and growth. Yellow party that stems on strategic planning, creativity, and financial planning. We're doing a blue party for all the fellas. Again, same type of thing, men empowerment, healing. And then we're doing a white party. And together, men and women in Springfield are going to be coming together to discuss the issues between us and build positive solutions. So that's history in the making. But within those events, we have to deconstruct and think about all the things that we've been through, right? And then lastly, we have artivism, which is a whole influx of different things, but the idea is pushing our pain to power. So going into the negative aspects of our history and seeing how we can create change within it for the next generation. So we have a lot of historical significance in the work we're doing next year.
So we're already a year, so I'm just going to ask that last question. In this new year, how will you maintain focus on your creativity, and what things do you have to tell us that are upcoming? So,
how am I going to maintain focus? I think it's really about being, we talk about having like accountability partners, stuff like that. And I know that right now I've definitely surrounded myself with great people who are going to hold me accountable.
Yeah.